Hello, everyone, and happy Monday. Bryce Kuhn here, another episode of the Crowded Booth Live, a Monday night. We put it out there on social media. We're Mondays, Wednesdays, and then a podcast release on Friday. It might look a little bit different. We got 4 guys with us. We're missing one of our normal guys, but we added 2 more, so addition by subtraction, you might say. I got Ralph Leary below me. I have Zach McKinnell over there, and then Palmer. First off, you've seen, if you've tuned in the show, you've seen Zach before he came on for an episode. Palmer is almost a regular at this point. I'm texting him almost every week. Hey, can you come on and talk about this? But we are more than excited to have you tune us today. Obviously, if you saw us on social media, the big topic of conversation this weekend and kind of going into Thursday, Friday, which, guys, Friday's not normally a news drop type of day, but I think when you saw Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all this stuff trending towards college football playoff expansion, I mean, the proposal's out there, and if I'm not mistaken, they're going to try to meet at some point this week to kind of talk over with the conference commissioners. So let's dive right in. Now, first off, we're going to just kind of get your opening thoughts. This is a little bit of a panel. I'm going to give it to Palmer first. We'll go to Zach, and then we're going to go to Ralph. Opening thoughts. Palmer, for you, the college football playoff could be expanded to 12 teams. That's the proposal right now. We're going to dive a little bit more into that. But for you, what is your just initial thought on what this could bring to the game of college football?
Yeah, I think we're going to dive into a little bit more about what the specifics of it may look like, but I think it's an incredible thing. It gets, teams that may not have had a chance to make it into a 4-team playoff. It gives them a chance. It gives those fan bases rooting interest late in the season. It keeps people more engaged late in the season because you've got, you go from, maybe 8, 9, if that, those amount of teams that are going to be interested in, the potential playoff ramifications. Now you're going to 15, 16, maybe up to 20, because, you're going to have, 2 teams that have 2 losses that are fighting it out, so that they don't get that third loss and would keep them in the college football playoff conversation. So I'm a big fan of it. There's one aspect of it that I'm a huge fan of, and I think it's something that we'll talk about later. But the home field games, I think those are going to be incredible.
Yeah, Ralph and I were talking about that. I know Zach's an Auburn fan. He's writing over for the FlyWarEagle. Congratulations, that, by the way. We've been seeing some of your stuff. That's a lot of awesome. But, Zach, for you, when you kind of dive in this, I know you have your own podcast. You all are probably going to talk about this at some point if you haven't already. What are your initial thoughts? I mean, what does this do for the game of college football?
I think it's a good thing. So on our show, we covered this last week, and we have an episode. It was like our 70th episode, like a year and a half ago, and we came up with this idea to release our ideal model. And over a year and a half ago, I said a 12-team model is what should happen. I think there's been this argument that there's not enough parity in college football, and it's because there's only 4 seats at the table. You claim to have a Power 5 conference, maybe a Power 6 with the AAC, but then you're leaving some of your top teams, away from the table. There's no reason that you should win the Big Ten and not have a chance to play for a national championship as Ohio State and Penn State have had in the past. I think it increases the parity. It can help with recruiting for some of these smaller schools in big areas. And when you look at college football compared to some of the other major sports, there's no reason there should only be 4 seats at the table. The model has worked in the NFL, the NBA, March Madness in college basketball. We're seeing right now in college baseball and college softball some of these big upsets, underdogs, the Cinderella stories. And college football, there's always been like this gentleman's old man club who's like, there should only be 4 teams that should be allowed, and really sometimes 2 that deserve to play for a national championship. I think this is moving college football in the right direction. And like I think we all agree, the group of 5 needs a seat at the table now, because it's not the old days where it's just the Power 5 and the rest of them. The AAC is showing year in and year out it deserves a spot at the table. So I think this is a huge step forward for college football.
It's a huge step forward, and you alluded to college baseball and college softball. What a run. I mean, this was, I think, for fans of those sports and fans that maybe just were tuning in, wanted to watch something, that heightened that. Ralph, I know that both those guys kind of brought up 2 points, but for you, I mean, you personally, I mean, I know you're kind of a group of 5 guy. This kind of does open a seat at the table for these schools, and we've seen them make decent runs in the past, and it also helps some of those smaller schools with recruiting.
Oh, yeah, this is huge for all kinds of schools, honestly. You know, group of 5, especially when you have guys like Coastal Carolina last year, this could have been huge for them. They could have made a playoff. Obviously, you're looking at teams that you're probably not going to be able to beat, though, and you play a higher seed and team that's more than likely to have a stronger strength of schedule. And that's another question I'm going to ask, you know, who has a stronger strength of schedule against each other. And obviously that's going to be thrown out there when they meet. And I know, obviously, we won't be sitting there and listening to them, but, you know, I'm sure that's a huge debate. It's going to have to be, because, you know, if you got a team that's played, you know, a strong SEC schedule facing someone who's played a Mountain West schedule that's been kind of weak, it's going to be a blowout. I know we have planned on talking about that later, but it's just there's a few things I want to know that before they do this, and you know, I'm still kind of up in arms, like maybe this is not the right time. They still need to figure some things out, and but you know, it's not my decision yet, so.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not going to be sitting in the room, and I think that's the biggest thing that people are going to be clamoring. And let's just go ahead and say it right here. People have had problems with the 4 teams getting in. There's going to be an argument for the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th team. Like, that's going to happen nonetheless. So let's talk about this. This one is going to be kind of the layout of what it is. Who's in? So we were talking about this before we went live. The 6 highest-ranked conference champions will be 1 through 6. 7 through 12 are going to be those teams that are, according to the College Football Playoff Committee, are ranked 7 through 12. So they're going to do the same type of rankings for that. So what is interesting, guys, is that there's no limit on the amount of conference teams. So if the SEC still wants to flex their muscles and find a way to get 4 teams in the playoff, they can do that if 6 through 12, they line up 4 teams out of those 6 spots. I think this gives an opportunity, though, guys, and the biggest thing, kind of like what Zach was saying, I think it gives an opportunity, like you said, for that 6th conference, whoever that might be. And I think it doesn't guarantee if you win your conference, you're going to get in. And Palmer, we'll go back to you with this. It does guarantee that if you are, let's say you're out of the AAC, or let's say you're a Sun Belt team, let's say Coastal Carolina has another perfect season. If they deem them better than let's say 11-1 or 12-1 Cincinnati, they're going to get that jump into that automatic number 6 spot. Do you like this? And when you kind of look, we know the big boys are going to get in. If you win the SEC, if you win the ACC for Clemson's purposes, all these other ones. But I think we're going to see some things, and it's going to help out a Pac-12 conference that struggled with playoff contention recently.
Yeah, you mentioned Coastal Carolina and the Pac-12. Coastal Carolina would have been in over the Pac-12 champion, which, you know, there's a lot of conversation about who the actual Pac-12 champion was. Oregon won the Pac-12 championship game, but they got in because of COVID implications. And so, you know, kind of a weird situation there. And last year was just a weird year in college football. But I think it is awesome for those you know, group of 5 teams. It's really going to help create. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about, okay, Power 5, Group of 5, and now, you know, with the AAC, you know, putting up year in and year out, you know, great teams that put up a good fight in the New Year's 6 bowl games. I mean, I was in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium to watch Cincinnati put up an incredible fight against Georgia, probably one of the best bowl games of this, you know, bowl season, and so, you know, it's going to give a conference like the AAC maybe a potential, you know, ability to say, hey, we're a Power 6. It's not a Power 5. And they've been saying that for a while now, you know, dating back to UCF and Houston and some of those teams. But, you know, you're going to have the ability to go out there and prove it year in and year out that you do belong with those other 5 conferences.
Yeah, Zach, I want to throw it to you because you mentioned it last time. How does this help some conferences and teams with recruiting? Because now you're seeing – especially you're seeing some teams, and let's say Coastal Carolina, and like Palmer said before the show started, Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati would have been in. Well, now those schools are a little more higher profile. UCF with their hire of Gus Malzahn, what they feel like they can do. You're going to see some of these programs, And even in the we'll say the lower echelon of these Power 5 conferences, kind of that tier 2 that we've seen across, especially in the SEC over the past couple of years, they may feel like, man, if we can find a way to get in that 12, 11, 10 range, we can have a shot. And I think that's going to see an increase in recruiting and make that more competitive as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look at like how it's going to help teams recruit, I really look at the model of college basketball and how, as much as people like to say UNC and Duke land, and Kentucky land all the big prospects, we're seeing that one run in the tournament could change the outlook of programs. You look at Alabama and Auburn landing 5-star prospects. Auburn just landed the number 3 player in the country in basketball, still based off a 2019 Final Four run. What happens if Cincinnati gets into the playoffs this year if this model is retroactively put back to 2020? If Cincinnati beats Georgia and goes on and wins in the second round for whoever they face, and they make a Final Four run, what does that do to the recruiting? Because now Luke Fickell can go into homes of prospects being recruited by Michigan and Ohio State saying, we have a chance to win a national title. You can come here and compete at the highest level. Right now, they don't have that. And I believe it was Josh Pate for 247 that said, you look at where all these AAC programs are located, the recruiting bases and the recruiting locations for these programs are so advantageous that all you need to do is insert a little bit of that college football playoff money, that college football playoff attention. And what could these programs do in recruiting? When you look at a school like Cincinnati recruiting out of Ohio, you look at UCF down in Florida, Houston in Texas, even a school like Tulane in Louisiana, which has some of the best prospects in the country. It could do so much to increase the parity because now players don't think that there's only 4 schools they can go to and realistically compete for a national title. Because right now it's Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. And if you're not at one of those 4 schools, do you really feel like you can go win a national title? Because I don't think you can.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things. You're alluding to what Josh Pate said. I mean, he talked about that American Conference. You have markets like Houston, New Orleans, Dallas, Orlando, Memphis, Tampa, Greenville. I mean, those are not small markets. And then, like you said, if you eject some of that energy, we'll see kind of what happens. And then you also got to bring in the NIL and what that would do. That could add a whole nother element. Ralph, we were kind of talking about this and we're alluding to this, so I'll give you this one. Group of 5 implications. What are some teams? I mean, we talked about it last year, Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati, which Cincinnati is such a weird group of 5 team because they're run like a Power 5 team and they could probably compete in a lot of Power 5 conferences. But when you take a look, especially the Sun Belt Conference, who we've seen teams like Appalachian State take step up. Troy had a good year a couple of years ago. I mean, these are teams. What does that do for that level? I mean, they have an opportunity to now, like Zach said, that coach can go into a home and say, hey, if you come here, there's a real shot. We don't have to be number 1 in the country. We can be number 12, number 11, number 10, sneak in, or we can win our conference and have a great year, upset somebody along the way, and sit in that number 6 spot.
Well, you bring up Troy real quick, and I know I'm a Troy Trojan at heart, so when they beat LSU that year, we all thought there was a chance. Obviously, they never made it past ranked 25 overall. But schools like Coastal Carolina this past year, you're sitting at 12 right now in the rankings from last year. You would have made that playoff as a Sun Belt team. You would have been the first team as a Sun Belt to make the playoffs. Teams like BYU could have made it. Liberty could have made it. Those small schools that don't really get a chance, from last year. Could have made it if they had this set up because when you have coaches that come from smaller schools into your city, you're watching them play and they upset your local team. You're sitting there like, wow, this would be a lot more fun to play with a smaller school and go and upset number 1, number 2 team in the country. It just that brings someone who doesn't get a lot of look from their local big school. A chance to go play somewhere where it actually means something to win. I mean, some of these small schools, when you beat a bigger school, it means a lot more to you because you can think about that for the rest of your life that, wow, I was there when we beat so-and-so or when we went on the road and upset somebody in the playoffs. That's something you never get to say down the road. And, coaches will be looking like, hey, we can do this next year if you come here with me. So.
Yeah, I think the recruiting pitch will change from, hey, you have a chance to play it against these big schools and beat them to you can play against these schools and beat them and you can find yourself in a playoff scenario. Ralph just shot me a text, and this is a very important thing to remember. Under this proposal, Notre Dame is kind of left out to dry out. Even if they are the number 1 team in the country, they cannot receive a bye or be seated higher than number 5 because they're not a conference champion. So this was not in our board, but quickly I'll go back to you, Palmer, and we can do a quick one-word answer. I'll throw it around to you. Does this force Notre Dame's hand to try and join a conference?
I don't think so. I think I think a lot of people are going to say that it does, but I think because of the strength of schedule that Notre Dame is going to have built up every season, it really gives them an advantage here because they're going to play so many games. And I was just looking at Notre Dame's schedule for this year. If this was the case for this year, they're playing at least 3 teams that have potential playoff implications between Cincinnati, North Carolina. They've got Wisconsin on the schedule. Florida State is a big name program. USC is always there. I mean, there's 5 programs right there. So I think Notre Dame is always going to have the opportunities to win these games. They just don't have to go undefeated anymore.
What you said, I saw a tweet the other day that said this. It said Notre Dame's schedule out of conference would be harder how they're playing now than maybe if they were playing in the ACC.
Exactly, and I think you saw that this past season when they were a full ACC member for the year, and they played more. They're going to play 5 ACC games every season, but they played 10, 11 ACC games this past year, and Clemson was their hardest challenge, and that was a great game both times. But you're not seeing them tested half a dozen times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that begs the question too. When you look at the regular season, guys. Are we going to see a potential schedule changes, maybe the number of games? Under this proposal, teams could possibly play up to 17 games. Zach, you were talking about the NFL. It's worked in that model, but at the college game, you may run into some issues with that, and also the quality. So what are your thoughts on that, Zach? Could we see maybe we didn't obviously have those cupcake games this year and in a sense, but could those go away? Do teams feel the need to play higher profile games, especially maybe not a Georgia and Alabama or Ohio State because they know they've got some locked-in conference games they're going to play? But we're talking about maybe one of those Cincinnatis, maybe those UCFs that says we've got to schedule a high-profile game because just in case we don't win our conference, we could still sneak in.
I don't think we're going to see the number of games in the regular season change because I think they did this at the perfect time. We had the NIL coming down the pipeline, and so now they're going to now that what the NCAA is going to tell these players, in my opinion, is well now you're making money. So you don't have the argument of amateurism anymore. So since you're making money, you're going to play 17 games because that makes us money. And so since y'all are making money, we're going to make money. I think that's how it's going to go. So I think they're going to keep the number of games the same. I honestly don't think the quality of the games really shift. I still think they would. I think the out-of-conference week 1, week 2 schedules might increase where you're like, okay, we at least have to play a ranked team. Because what's going to happen is it's going to be just like the NCAA basketball tournament where they're like, well, look at this team. We beat number 25. We beat number 20. We beat number 17. And all it's going to take is the SEC one year to get 4 or 5 teams in. And you're going to see Clemson and these other teams start scheduling higher and higher ranked opponents because they're not going to want to hear that schedule argument. And for the out of conference, cupcake games, I think this works perfectly from the storyline that we're seeing from spring practices. I think Mike Gundy was the first coach to say it where they want the NCAA to make it where your spring game isn't an inter-squad scrimmage anymore. They want to play the Samford. So Alabama would play Samford for their spring game. And that allows them to see more and more players in a live game environment. They don't have to play each other, a less risk of, player on both sides being hurt, something like that. And so I think what that's going to do is make the spring practice schedule more changed rather than the quality of games in the regular season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that would be something interesting. Obviously, Mike Gundy brought that up, and I think that kind of excited fans. And 2, it excites those media entities, too, because that's another dollar that you can put on a Saturday when you're trying to fill time in the spring. I want to ask about this before we head to a quick break, and then we're going to talk some more about it. Guys, does this water down the regular season? Is this going to take some of the big games that we see, especially this year in a Clemson versus Georgia? I mean, this season, I think, is going to be, and I'm going to steal a word from Josh Pate, a full renaissance of college football because we didn't have the full capacity. We have some high-profile out-of-conference games. I mean, these are the ones that back in 2016, we didn't think much about because this is 2021. So-and-so is going to schedule a computer. Like, that's 5 years away. It's not that. So, Palmer, I'll start with you. We'll go around the horn here real quick before we head to commercial. Does it water down the regular season? Do some of these games maybe not mean as much anymore? Or to you, does it stay the same? It's still going to be great.
It changes the way that regular season games, are significant. I think because, in this scenario, you can afford one loss, but it makes those games down between two lost teams a lot more important. So I think you're not going to see. Let's look back at the 2019 season, the battle between LSU and Alabama. Both teams came in undefeated, and it was hey, winner is in the playoff, loser is going to be on the outside looking in all likelihood, and that ended up being the case. Obviously, Alabama ended up losing to Auburn later that season. That game, probably the single game importance of that one wouldn't be as much, but you would have seen that Alabama and Auburn game meaning a lot more because that would have been for a potential playoff spot. So I think it just changes the way that the regular season is important. It doesn't water it down because you're like I said earlier, you've got so many more teams that are going to be in the playoff hunt. It just changes the importance of some of these games.
Yeah, it changes maybe some of the importance. Ralph, I'll go back to you, then we'll go to Zach real quick. For you, does it water down those regular season games, or are you kind of on board with Palmer and maybe his thought process?
Well, no, I think every game matters, and I think it always should matter. I mean, no matter who you're playing, they always look at it. When it comes down to the final days of picking who's going to be in the playoffs, they look at every single game and they took it seriously or not. If you go and you do a cupcake game like we say, and you win by 6 or 3 or 6 points, like Auburn did against Mercer a few years ago, they're going to look at that and say, all right, they didn't really play very well. Maybe we should they'll dock some points from them total. Every game matters. Auburn travels to Penn State this year. That game's going to matter. And when you come home, you have a very tough game against Georgia State. Obviously, a lot of people don't think that's true, but Georgia State's a team that can scare you. So, some of these games where you play a big out-of-conference team, you come home to someone a little bit smaller, those are the games that really matter the most. So you got to be careful about those.
Yeah, Ralph already repping the Sun Belt. Absolutely love it. Georgia State did put a scare in the Vols a couple years ago. Zach, for you, before we go to commercial, does the regular season mean as much? Are you kind of on what they're thinking, or will we see maybe a decrease in some of these higher profile games? Would teams maybe play it the safe way in scheduling?
I don't think so, because you're going to have to play the big games for seeding. I mean, let's be honest. If we even took the 2-team play or the 4-team playoff model, does anyone in this group right now think the loser of that game is out of playoff contention, even in a 4-team model? Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's probably not. And so the 12-team model, I think, makes the regular season more important because now not only – because one loss can eliminate a certain team from a playoff spot. We've never seen a 2-loss team. So once you get to 2 losses – your schedule kind of becomes irrelevant at that point if you're a normal team. I mean, maybe the occasional 2017 Auburn, if Bama would have had 2 losses, they would have gotten in. Something like that might be different. But for a majority of teams, 2 losses, that's the end of your season. And then you have to go play a quote-unquote meaningless bowl game. Well, now this not only makes the bowl games important because now they're playoff games, it makes every single week important because you can have 2, maybe depending on the program, 3 losses, and now you're playing for seeding and you're fighting with these, number 18 through number 8. That ranking right there every week for the College Football Playoff Reveal show on ESPN is going to be nerve-wracking because drop a spot, you go from playing a 7 seed to, okay, if I win my game, now I got to go play number 1 seed Alabama if I don't win this game. So we're going to see a lot of matchup projection change the importance of some of these games because one loss could change whether you play Alabama or Notre Dame in the next round. And just based on the history of college football, that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a big difference. We saw that over the past couple of years. We're going to come right back with a commercial. After the commercial, we have some talk about maybe some potential blowouts. What would happen to some of the bowl games? We're going to have a little explanation on that as well. And then maybe hypothetically here in 2021, if it was somehow implemented for this year, we're going to take a look at what that might look like. And we'll take a look back at 2020 as well right after this.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place, fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?
Back here on the Crowded Booth, we're talking about college football playoff expansion. We have Zach McKinnell, Palmer, Thombs. Zach obviously covering Auburn over on FlyWarEagle. I got that right, Zach? I've got everything right on that?
Yes, FlyWarEagle. Yep, you're good.
FlyWarEagle. Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
And then Palmer Thombs with Dogs 24/7. Both these guys have been really busy recruiting as well. We've talked a little about how recruiting can be affected. And then Ralph here below us covering area recruiting down here in the Chattahoochee Valley, as well as some college football as well. Palmer, I want to throw it back to you because kind of one of the big things in the argument has been from the people who don't want to expand the playoff, and I've been in that group a little bit as well, is, well, why does it matter if the same 4 teams are going to end up in that Final Four anyway? Zach's talked about some of those upsets. We've seen some of the upsets. I believe that all these teams want it as a chance. They'll get that. But how do you deal with some potential blowouts? Because I think at some time, Palmer, it could get ugly. You're going to have those games that could end up a 45-14 game that was really never close or something like that. But would you agree that you can have to live with maybe some of the blowouts just so these teams can get a seat at the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the 4-team playoff, and there have been plenty of blowouts there. You know, if you're trying to avoid the blowouts, go back to the 2-team BCS model, and even then you saw blowouts. So I think that's just the way that football is. You know, you're going to see, depending on how the ball bounces on any given Saturday, or whatever day they end up playing these games on. I think that they're going to play the semifinal, try and play the semifinal games on New Year's Eve or something like that. But whatever day it falls on, I think it's just going to happen. And I think you're going to end up seeing, because there's going to be more games, you're going to see, 11 games now, to eliminate these 12 teams. You're going to see more football, which just means the chance for more really good games. And I think, looking back on the 4-team playoff, there's only been a handful of really, really good games. I mean, the Georgia-Oklahoma game comes to mind, the Ohio State-Clemson game, the first round of that, a couple of the national championship games, maybe even the Ohio State-Alabama Sugar Bowl from the first season. But you haven't had a ton of great games in the semifinals anyway. What more does how much more can it hurt to have some of these games played on the campuses? That's one thing that I want to mention again. Played on campuses, great atmospheres, and maybe you see blowouts, but I like trusting college football to give us really good games.
Yeah, you talked about playing on campuses. I'm going to throw it real quick to Zach because, Zach, I know you're an Auburn guy, and I had a conversation with our other co-host, Will and Ralph, and we were talking about it. Auburn is such a tough place to play. If they ever got the chance to host a playoff game there, I mean, I've been to some Auburn games as a road fan. It's a tough environment. So for you, how cool would that be to see those first-round matchups played at home sites and have that electricity in, let's say, December? I mean, I just think that would be unreal. Auburn aside, any place.
Absolutely. And I mean, the model that I would like to see is I want the second round to be home too. I think those teams that get a bye week should be able to host a playoff game, and that should be another reward for being one of the top 4 teams in the country. I mean, you look at some of the matchups we could have had. I mean, I believe on our show, we did models all the way back to like 2016, and you would have got Auburn, Miami, and Jordan Hare in 2017. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that matchup would just blow my mind. And then you've got other matchups like Penn State, Iowa State, and Happy Valley, which they probably would have redid the whiteout for that one. I mean, you get such good matchups. But to the blowout thing, I agree with Palmer here. Did anyone have fun watching LSU put 63 points on Oklahoma in 2 quarters of football? Because that game wasn't even fun to watch. I mean, come on. And then you talk about the 2-team playoff. How about when USC beat Oklahoma in 05, like 56-20? I mean, there's been blowouts all throughout, or Miami in 01 putting 30 up in one. It was like 30-0 in the first half against Nebraska. You're going to have blowouts week in and week out, but when you have all these different matchups between schools that have never played each other, between schools in different environments that they've never played in, I think odds are you're going to get more close games, better historic games than you will blowouts. And yeah, there might be an occasional blowout. Like I think the model in 2016 had Western Michigan playing Ohio State in Columbus. Yeah, that's probably a blowout. But on the off chance Western Michigan pulls off that upset, I'll take watching 4 or 5 blowouts every few years for a historic upset like that. And I mean, you look at the March Madness tournament, all the blowouts from 1 versus 16 seeds year in and year out. But the one year that it didn't turn out like that, is going to go down in history. And so I'm willing to bet on that and watch a few blowouts for the chance of that happening.
Bryce, before you go to Ralph here, I want to chime in again. Just like Zach said, I mean, I think it is a shame that those 1 through 4 seeds don't get to play a home playoff game. From a fan's perspective, I would almost rather be the 5 seed, have to play that extra game, but get a chance to host an atmosphere like that. I mean, just thinking about some of the college football atmospheres I've been in, say around the SEC, like you said, Auburn, Tennessee has great atmospheres. I mean, I think back to I was at the Tennessee-Oklahoma game, when Baker Mayfield came onto the scene. That was a great atmosphere. Sanford Stadium against Notre Dame was awesome. You know, it is chock full of great atmospheres. LSU, Alabama. I mean, it would be a shame if, let's just say Alabama gets a 1 seed every year. And just like I feel like everyone's going to assume that Tuscaloosa never gets to host a playoff game in this model, it wouldn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, that's probably my one problem. And I was talking about what I was thinking what Zach was saying was so perfect because you would love to see. I mean, it's almost like you don't get rewarded for being one of those 4 seeds. Now you do get the bye, you don't have to play an extra game, but we've seen too, guys. Sometimes the long layoff does hurt some teams. They would have to take a week, and sometimes a team gets hot. I know it's not necessarily a sport where you want to play as many games as possible, but Ralph, for you on this, I loved what Zach said. He would take the 4 to 5 blowouts for that one game. And you've talked a little bit about that. We've seen some of the regular season. I mean, that's why that Appalachian State Michigan game from so many years ago is still like on this pedestal as one of the top, upsets of all time. For you, I know you've been around some guys that have played at the group of 5 level. What would that mean just for them to get the chance to sit at the table? And I guarantee you that one time, like Zach said, it happened, it would just mean everything.
Well, yeah, when I was at Troy, we hosted Boise State, and I know that's not your typical Power 5, but at the time, that's a huge school coming to Troy to play. And before I got there, they hosted Mississippi State before, and Navy a few times, and Missouri in an upset a while way back before I was even in college. Some of those guys talk about those encounters when they played Nebraska and LSU, and at Boise State and at Clemson. Just the atmosphere and how huge it is to see that it's like some of these crowds you're playing against. Troy hosting, maybe 15,000, 20,000 fans, and then you had to go to Clemson, and you're almost sitting there, you're seeing like, wow, this is huge. And Nebraska is even larger, and it's just crazy to see. And they wanted for them to have a full stadium for a playoff game. I know obviously it's a hard thing to reach for, but for them to see that kind of stuff, it'd be huge for these guys, especially when they a lot of them don't get a chance to be on national television, to actually get to play on national television and get seen for how great some of those guys are. I mean, Troy had a lot of great guys in the past few years that once they were heard about and seen on TV, they're like, wow, these kids are pretty good at some of these smaller schools. And it's true because they're not able to play on national television. That's the main thing people are going to miss, is that playing on national television is huge, and not every school gets to do it.
We talk about exposure. Zach hit the nail right on the head. Look at college baseball. Obviously, Dallas Baptist, their run ended today, but what they were able to do, how far they were able to go. Some of that exposure, I think if you get over the initial, like you said, the gentleman's club of this thing of, the 4 teams, like you said, Zach, this could have, and I love what you said because it tied in together. You could have maybe, you're going to get your Western Michigan against Ohio State, 43-14 game. But that off chance that, let's say, App State comes in and they upset, let's say, Georgia, and they beat them, by a field goal late and something like that, that's the one that's going to set the pedestal, and we'll be able to look back and say, this is why this playoff happened.
My job would be crazy that night.
And your job would obviously be crazy that night, and your Twitter feed would be with a lot of Georgia football fans on Twitter. That would be hysterical. Guys, we're going to take a look at, hypothetically, the 2021 playoffs. I don't know if you have some preseason rankings in front of you. That's okay. But we were talking a little bit about what it might look like going into this season. So let's say, and let's make sure we have this correct. I want to make sure we read this and everything. But this is going to be something where the group would need to agree to the model. It will then present the plan to the 11 presidents and chancellors who comprise the College Football Playoff Board of Managers on June 22nd. Then you have another meeting in September. So obviously this would not be, something that happens, now, it won't end before September. But this, this would be something to be interesting. The current 12-year agreement right now runs through the 2025-2026 season, that the playoff, how it's set now. So let's just say, hypothetically, they've pushed it through and we are playing a 12-team playoff this year. Palmer, I'll let you kick it off because this was definitely your idea. So who are you seeing maybe as your top 4? And let's make sure we get this right for fans and people watching tonight. Who are your top 4 conference champions that would occupy that 1 through 4 seed?
Yeah, so I've got mine in no particular order. Out of the ACC, Clemson. Out of the Big 12, Oklahoma. Out of the Big 10, Ohio State. And out of the SEC, Georgia. I think those are going to be – yep. I see the look on your face there. I think – I think that it would be Georgia's year. And, and I think, those 4 conferences have kind of set themselves above the rest. I think that you could very easily make a case that, an Alabama would be better, that, would be one of those top 4 teams. But again, because of the, qualifications and rules here, they would not be a top 4 seed. They would be, either 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range, even if they were one of the top 4 teams in the country. So I think those would be my top 4 seeds based on conference champion in no particular order.
Zach, I'm going to throw it to you. Is yours the same? Do you have something different? What are you rolling with your top 4?
Yeah, so I definitely have Oklahoma coming out of the Big 12. I think that's as close to a given. I think in the conference this year is you can have. I actually do have Georgia coming out of the SEC too this year. I mean, when you land 2 5-stars in a matter of like 45 seconds in your 2 biggest positions of need, I mean, that's going to be tough. And Alabama is bringing in a new starting quarterback and new people all over the board. So right now on June 14th, I would pick Georgia. I do have Clemson coming out of the ACC barely. I think North Carolina is going to give them a big run. And I actually have Wisconsin coming out of the Big 10 this year. Wow. I think Ohio State, that quarterback battle, I'm not sold on C.J. Stroud. I'm more sold on the freshman kid they have. I'm blanking on his name. But if they start C.J. Stroud, I think Oregon gets them early. And I think Wisconsin can get them later in the year. So, yeah, those would be my 4 buys right now.
Ralph, who are you putting in the 4 buys? No pressure. We've dropped the bomb on Georgia. So, obviously, Palmer's following is going to be okay. Zach, his Auburn following that he has just had a little mini heart attack that they had to put. It was going to be a no-win for you. It's either Alabama or Georgia. So there you go.
There's no chance. I would not bet a single penny on Auburn coming anywhere near the top 4, so they knew what was coming.
They knew it was coming. Ralph, for you, who are your 4 buys coming and what conferences?
Well, I think the Big 12 is a tough year for them this year. Obviously, Texas, with Sarkisian at the helm now, it's be a different year. But obviously, I give them 2 to 3 years before they're back in that saddle again. Oklahoma, they're here. So I got Oklahoma coming to the Big 12. I'm gonna stick with Alabama. It's one of those teams that you can't forget about. I mean, every year they're always there. They're always that good. They're the best. I mean, they win the national championship almost every year. It feels like. I'm going with North Carolina though. I think North Carolina is too good this year because they have 10 returning defensive players this year. And that's a huge thing sometimes overlooked. And 8 on offense. I mean, you have a great quarterback who's a Heisman candidate this year. You lose a lot of running backs. Obviously, that can be replaced. You have a quarterback who can sling it better than most of them. And I guess I gotta go Ohio State. As much as I don't want to, because I did like the Wisconsin pick, but I just feel safe with Ohio State being that one.
So luckily, here's the host. I don't have to come up with any, so I'm going to let you guys take it. But I do like what you said. I think a potential sleeper team out of that would be a team out of the AAC. What could they do this year? I don't have their regular season schedules in front of me. Obviously, UCF has made some noise with their hire that they have. Cincinnati's still there. They still have a Ritter at quarterback.
And they've got Notre Dame.
And you have Notre Dame. And Indiana.
And on that schedule. Yeah. They get both of them.
So so you've kind of upped the high profile. Maybe they sneak in over, maybe a 1 or 2 loss conference champion. We'll have to see how that rolls.
I think Liberty too. Malik Willis. I mean, even as an Auburn guy, it breaks my heart to say it. Malik Willis is a baller, and I mean, there's talk that he could have a year where he surpasses Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell as the number 1 quarterback in the country. And I mean, if he has a year kind of like he did last year, especially toward the end, Liberty and Hugh Freeze could shock everybody.
Yeah, they've got a big game or two on their schedule as well. I think the Liberty. I
think they have Ole Miss like week 10. It's like it's like the first week of November.
They play at Ole Miss, and I know they travel to Syracuse as well.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we talked about earlier, the college football season this year is going to be absolutely electric. We're not going to go through everyone's 5 through 12, but I think we kind of were alluding to that. What's a team that you feel like could sneak in to the playoff? And maybe it's, a fourth SEC team, they able to get somebody, or maybe it is a Liberty or someone like that. We'll start with you, Ralph, this time, and we'll go work our way backwards. For you, who's maybe a team that you could see sneaking in?
I mean, I don't know if it's a sneak in really because they're just be that good. And I just think it's either – this is a really risky pick. Ole Miss.
Wow.
I think Ole Miss has a strong chance to really beat some people. Obviously, they're not beating Alabama. But I feel like they have a strong chance to make a push into the rankings toward the end of the year. And Mississippi State down the end of the road, you're probably going to beat them this year. And they have a good chance. They have a great quarterback with Matt Corral. They have talented receivers. They have a great running back. The defense is about the same. I mean, it's a good team. I think Ole Miss can sneak in as that 11 or 12. And obviously, you're not hosting, but you can go on the road and you got Lane Kiffin at the helm. He's ready to be anyone.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin is ready to beat anybody. Zach, I'm going to go with you next, and we're going to end it with Palmer. Zach, for you, who's a team that you could sneak in? You kind of talked about Liberty there, but maybe what's somebody else, or is that your pick?
I mean, I would probably put Liberty right now, but my sneaky pick would be Indiana. I think a lot of people slept on Indiana late in the year because of Michael Penix's injury. But Michael Penix is supposedly fully healthy. They landed a transfer of running back. They landed a defensive lineman out of Auburn. They had like a string there for like 2 weeks where they landed like 4 or 5 star transfers to Indiana. And Tom Allen is the most underrated head coach. And they came within one drive of beating Ohio State last year when they were at their best. That defense returns a lot of starters. Michael Penix is back. They finally got a running back in there. And it was the guy from USC. I'm blanking on his name off the top of my head, but they got a running back. I think Indiana, if they can get past Ohio State, they might even sneak in as a bye if they can win the Big Ten.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Palmer, I'm going to give mine last. I hope you don't take mine. So go ahead. Who do you have?
Well, so y'all have mentioned a lot of teams that I've thought about for that 12th spot, Wisconsin, Liberty. I thought about Ole Miss. I didn't end up going with them. But this is a team that we haven't mentioned so far. I've actually got 2 teams that we haven't mentioned so far, and I think both of them they're not necessarily sleepers, but they aren't part of that gentleman's club that we've talked about. And that would be Arizona State and Iowa State. Yeah, still.
I knew it. I knew I was wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, with Iowa State, they've got the quarterback, they've got a running back, very potentially the best running back in the country in Breece Hall. And then Arizona State, they've got a coach that knows how to win some of these playoff type games, and some high pressure games. He's been at the NFL level in Herm Edwards, and then a quarterback in Jaden Daniels. I mean, the kid can play football. I think out of that Pac-12, Oregon would be another team that you would look at, and they've got that high profile game against Ohio State. Obviously, this is a hypothetical here, but I think those are 2 teams that I would really look at as a sleeper.
Well, you took mine in Iowa State, and the reason was because they're returning all but 4 starters on both sides of the ball. Brock Purdy, Breece Hall. This is a team that's kind of reworked their defensive line. I love them out of the Big 12, and they're kind of my number 2 team out of the Big 12. But I'm going to go with another one, and I'm going with a Group of 5 school, and I'm going with the Raging Cajuns out of Louisiana. The reason why is because week 1, they're on the road at Texas. If they could somehow upset Texas, that could catapult them. You never know with these schools. They could get on a roll. If they clear through their Sun Belt schedule, we know that through their schedule, they're going to play App State. They're going on the road to Georgia Southern. They're going to play at South Alabama, who, I'm sorry, Ralph, will probably be better. They also go on the road to Liberty. That's another top 25 win that they could probably play. So, listen, Louisiana, we saw what they did last year. If the Raging Cajuns, look, they did what they needed to do. We were talking about earlier, Zach. They scheduled that high-profile game, and then they have also got another game against Liberty that's going to be a really fun matchup. If they ran the table, maybe they could sneak in as that 12 or 11 seed, and who knows? It would be a ton of fun. I don't know if they would maybe reach, depending on what happens. College football has chaos, guys. I don't know if they could sneak into that top 6 conference champion, but maybe they would have the resume to be able to do that. But, guys, I appreciate you being on. First off, as we close here, Zach, tell us where everybody can follow you and where they can find your work. I know you've been pumping that out, especially with visits happening and everything of that for Auburn.
Absolutely. I mean, you can catch me on FlyWarEagle. It's FlyWarEagle.com, part of the Fan-Sided Network. We cover all things Auburn football. I want to follow me specifically, the Blue Blood CFB podcast, man. We're on YouTube, any and all streaming platforms. Episodes Monday through Friday every day. Right now we're doing an SEC in 30 days where we have someone come on to talk about the SEC program on every episode. So you guys can check us out if y'all want to, and definitely appreciate any and all the support.
Palmer, I know everyone knows you here on the show just about, but I know you're a busy man, and where can people find you?
Yeah, we've been pumping out the recruiting coverage over at Dogs247, and then you can find me on Twitter at Palmer Thombs.
Palmer Thombs. And then, Ralph, I know people know where you, but go ahead and throw your Twitter handle in there. Where can people find you, and what are we talking about? I know we're going to see you again on Wednesday.
What are we talking about Wednesday?
No, I said I know we're going to see you again on Wednesday.
Oh, yeah. Obviously. I'm always here.
He's always here. Ralph's always here. Ralph, you can also throw out your Twitter handle. That's okay. The other guys did too.
It's just Ralph Leary.
It's just Ralph Leary. I'm Bryce Kuhn. Thanks for joining us. We had a fantastic night talking about the college football playoff. I want to throw it last one more time. Closing thoughts, deal or no deal. If you're presented with this, I know there's still some things. Real quick, yes or no. Ralph, are you taking this 12-team proposed deal?
Yes.
Yes. Palmer?
Yes.
Zach?
Absolutely.
Bang the gavel. It is unanimous. We will all take it. I know Ralph was a little skeptical at the beginning, but guys, this has a potential to really be some exciting college football that's going to happen. So I appreciate it. For everyone, I'm Bryce Kuhn saying so long. We'll see you again on Wednesday. Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Palmer. We'll definitely get you guys on the show again. Awesome.